Recognize myself, and I'll be the last questioner. Ms. Weikert, I think it was you in your opening that mentioned the diminution of trust, public trust, and the government in general, not just employees, but government in general. Is there any data, and what does it show in terms of what generates that distrust? So it'd be tough to work for an entity that that people didn't trust.
So the data that I referenced there is referenced in the document, the President's Management Agenda, which I could bring out additional components. But we actually looked at specific areas, and we highlight in that report what the particular areas of problem that the American people have. And in a lot of cases, I think the issues are issues of balance and issues of, is government focused on the right issues? Are they primarily focused on mission? Are they focused on giving people the services they need when they want them, when they need them? I think a lot of the distrust actually comes from the hyper-partisan kind of dialogues that they see on the television. And what we see when we've done some of these listening tours, talking to federal employees, talking to citizens all over the country about what they're looking for, they value the services that our employees deliver. They absolutely appreciate when, you know, FEMA is there to rescue them for a flood, or a USDA employee is there to help protect their home in a fire, whether they're in California or Wyoming. But what they don't like is all the blockages to getting things done the right way. And when, you know, they have to hang on hold forever if they're trying to deal with death benefits, if they're a survivor of a veteran, things of that nature.
So there's an efficiency component, if I heard you correctly, and then there's just the general political environment that we find ourselves in, and that when you constantly hear how untrustworthy government is, it tends to shockingly have an impact on the listener from time to time.
Absolutely. And I feel like we've got an opportunity, and I mean this most sincerely. Good government is an area where I absolutely believe we can have bipartisan support. I've actually been completely gratified by the types of dialogues I've had with members of this body and other folks about these issues. So I really believe we can help change both the outcomes and the process.
All right, well, this is what I want you to do for me. I've heard you use the word bipartisan a couple of times. I heard Chairman Meadows use it a couple of times, but I also had a really good opportunity to listen to the ranking member's opening statement. And it was not complimentary on the Trump administration and how they view federal workers. Lay aside the fact that I disagreed with most of it and been a federal worker for a large part of my life, as have other members on my side. Take the time I have left and convince, not us, but people who may be watching, that this administration and the changes you propose are rooted and motivated in a respect for federal workers and a desire to make it better.
Absolutely. And I think a lot of this starts with listening. And I heard what the ranking member said, and I think these are very valid concerns. They're not unique concerns to government. These are issues that our fellow citizens, whether they work in government or they work in the private sector, face. They face challenges of dislocation. They face concerns about, you know, taking care of their families and you know, doing their daily business. We need to have a fact-based conversation, and you know, I think it starts in this particular instance with the data around the Federal Employee Viewpoint Survey, and it starts with how do we address the problems the federal employees themselves find to be the biggest barriers to serving the American people. And when I look at those things, there are things around performance-based compensation. There are things around, do they have the resources to do their job? It's things around, are the right merit system principles in place so that the best people get the best compensation and the worst people aren't there to disrupt the work of everyone else. I think those are the things that we legitimately are trying to use a fact base to tackle, and then use the tools that blend the best of IT modernization, the best of data and analytics, with helping elevate the work that our American workers do to serve the American people.
I'm out of time, and then I'm going to recognize a gentleman from Missouri. There have been a number of witnesses throughout the time I've been on this committee that have sat at the table where you are, and they have described conduct that is not just poor performance, it is trending towards criminal. In fact, had it been reported and investigated and prosecuted, it would have been criminal. So under the general heading of morale, I would think not having to work for someone who is simply moved from position to position after credible allegations of sexual harassment, I would think being able to terminate that kind of conduct, that's not poor performance.
No.
That's criminal. So to the extent you can address that, it would be the right thing to do and also good for morale. With that, the gentleman from Missouri.
I thank the chairman.
Thank you, Secretary Nelson. As I sit here today, I'm extremely concerned about the administration's repeated attacks on some of the most vulnerable communities, and in particular children and pregnant women, as it relates to the work of DHS. And in particular, under your leadership, DHS has rescinded the DACA program, and under the leadership of the administration, predating your arrival as Secretary, DHS has rescinded the DACA program, putting 700,000 young people at risk of deportation. It has separated 700 children from their parents at the border since October of 2017, including more than 100 children who are under the age of 4. The agency has released a directive that allows for more detention of pregnant women to immigrant detention facilities. The agency has instituted a new information sharing system between the Office of Refugee Resettlement and ICE that is likely to have a chilling effect on sponsors who otherwise would be willing to come forward to provide care for unaccompanied minors, and instead of allowing those children to remain in detention. The agency has dramatically increased enforcement actions that have left an untold number of both immigrant and U.S. citizen children without one or both parents, leaving some of those children in the child welfare system. And then just last Wednesday, the Washington Post reported that you are considering undermining the Flores Agreement, an agreement that ensures standards of care for immigrant children, such as the provision of meals and recreation, and that they are placed in a least restrictive setting as possible. In the course of carrying out these actions, the administration has routinely provided misleading information to this committee, and has even gone so far as to claim that policies such as routinely separating families are carried out in the best interest of the child, which many consider to be cruel. So my question to you is, last Thursday, when the New York Times reported that the President has directed you to separate parents from children when they cross into the United States as a way to deter illegal immigration, is that correct? Have you been directed to separate parents from children as a method of deterrence of undocumented immigration?
I have not been directed to do that for purposes of deterrence, no.
What purpose have you been given for separating parents from their children?
So my decision has been that anyone who breaks the law will be prosecuted. If you're a parent or you're a single person or you happen to have a family, if you cross between the ports of entry, we will refer you for prosecution. You've broken U.S. law.
At an April 26th hearing, I asked Undersecretary James McCammett to provide me with what percentage of cases exist in your agency where a child has been separated from a parent or guardian since October of 2017, wherein the case resulted in trafficking charges. I've not been given that information. Can you provide that to me?
I do not have it now, but yes, I will provide it to you.
Okay. Can you do that by the end of next week?
If we have the information, yes.
Thank you. I also asked that I be provided with what training and procedures are being given to CBP officers as it relates to how they are instructed to carry out family separation. I've not received that information. Do you have that today?
No, you have not asked me for it, so I do not have it. But
No,
I'm
I
happy
asked
to give
him
it
for
to you.
it. Okay, so again, by the end of next week, please.
Can you explain a little more what you're looking for?
Sure. So your agency will be separating children from their parents. And I
No,
would
what we'll be doing is prosecuting parents who've broken the law, just as we do every day in the United States of America.
I can appreciate that. But if that parent has a 4-year-old child, what do you plan on doing with that child?
The child under law goes to HHS for care and custody,
They will be separated from their parent.
just
And so
like
my
we do in the
question-
United States
so-
every day.
So they will be separated from their parent. And my question then is, when you are separating children from their parents, do you have a protocol in place about how that should be done? And are you training the people who will actually remove a child from their parent on how to do that in the least traumatic way? I would hope you do train on how to do that. And so the question is, and the request has been, to give us the information about how you are training and what the protocols are for separating a child from their parent.
I'm happy to provide you with the training information.
Thank you. And what steps are being taken, if you can tell me, to ensure that once separated, parent and child, that there will be an opportunity to at least sustain communication between the parent and their child?
The children are at HHS, but I'm happy to work with HHS to get you an answer for that.
And I'd like it to be broken down between what you're doing for children over the age of 4 and what you're doing for children under the age of 4. On May 4th, the president of the American Academy of Pediatrics issued a statement on behalf of the organization stating that he is appalled by a new policy by the DHS that will forcibly separate children from their parents. He went on to talk about that they will create stressful experiences like family separation, which can cause irreparable harm, disrupting a child's brain architecture, affecting his or her short and long-term health. And these findings are generally shared by the American Medical Association and many child welfare advocates and professionals. Last Tuesday, before Senate appropriations, you testified that you are, quote, working with the community to understand the science as it relates to the impact of such separation. Do you dispute that separating a child from their parent will create and cause trauma for that child?
I believe the question that was asked to me if I was aware of the information, and what I said is I would be happy to look into the studies. Again, we do not have a policy to separate children from their parents. Our policy is if you break the law, we will prosecute you. You have an option to go to a port of entry and not illegally cross into our country.
Secretary Nielsen, we do have a policy in this country as a general matter in the justice system that if someone breaks the law, they will be prosecuted. We also have protocols about what is allowable and not in connection with an arrest, in connection with detention in a jail, in connection with how many hours or days with which we can bring charges or not. So to suggest that the only law in this country relates to what you do at the end is really misleading.
But that's not what I just said, ma'am. If you're asking if we train and we take care of them and we work with HHS, we now have a memorandum of agreement so that we can make sure that the children go to people who are actually family members and who are not traffickers and who won't abuse them.
Great. So those are the policies I'd like to see.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you. Secretary Nielsen, how many children have been separated from their parents at ports of entry since January of 2017?
So I understand you referenced 700 before, which I believe was an HHS number. Our figures are not the same as theirs, but we're happy to come give you our numbers and explain why they differ.
Okay, great. And can you submit that by the end of next week with the other information? And do you know?
Could you share that with the committee? I think that's something.
Of course.
If you guys have different numbers of children, that's something that just on its face is rather alarming.
Yeah.
So I'd like to figure out why.
Yes, I think it's in part because when HHS does the interview, they don't ask the child why they're unaccompanied. So their numbers are different than ours if you're asking at the border, for example. So it's not necessarily that they conflict, it's just they're asking different questions. But yes, of course, we'll provide you the information
Thanks.
explaining you that.
Okay, and again, I've asked these questions of Undersecretary McCammett before, so perhaps everyone's working on it, and I would expect that we should get it by the end of next week. And can you also give us information about what the average length of separation has been between those children and their parents? And that would be that number that you are now going to bring to us.
Okay.
And also what timelines in terms of the policy that you have, exists to establish a parental relationship or to reunify families? I'm hoping and will assume that your protocols would have such a goal in mind, or at least a time frame.
Yes, ma'am, they do. Part of it is a voluntary DNA test if it's a family member. The concern that I have with that, and we do offer that, but the concern, of course, is you could still have a custodial relationship and not be a blood relative. So it's not dispositive to an appropriate custodian. But yes, of course, that is our goal.
And then as it relates to the number of children who have been separated from their parents at points of entry, again, I would like also for the committee information on how many of those cases resulted in trafficking charges. Regarding detention conditions, Secretary, are you aware that multiple federal oversight bodies, such as the OIG and the GAO, have documented medical negligence of immigrants in the detention system, in particular that ICE has reported 170 deaths in their custody since 2003? Are you familiar with that?
No, ma'am.
Are you aware that they also found that pregnant women in particular receive insufficient medical attention while in custody, resulting in dehydration and even miscarriages?
I do not believe that is a current assessment of our detention facilities.
Okay, can you please submit to this committee